Hey everyone, my name's Michael. I'm the Customer Success Lead at Xano, and in this video I want to go over dot notation, which is a very useful and powerful tool in Xano and one of the more important concepts. Dot notation is not necessarily unique to Xano. It's very common in programming in general. And dot notation basically allows you to access a specified field of some kind of variable. So let's go ahead and start to demo this, because this allows us to, when we're accessing these specific fields, we're allowed to transform that data or manipulate it to get it as exact as we want. So I'm going to jump to this endpoint, which just gets me a record of a car. Let's go ahead and run this. I'll do car ID 1, and let's take a look at the response here on the right. We can see we have information like make, model, year. Looks like there is an object array with some different maintenance that includes maybe when the maintenance was done, and also the description of what maintenance happened. So like I said, dot notation allows us to access a specific field in a variable. So let's say we wanted to find out, let's say, the make of the car. Well, in Xano, you can use dot notation on any input line that you can access a variable from. So for example, here in the response, if I just wanted to return the make, I could simply do dot make and hit save and go ahead and run this. And now we're returning just the make. Now also, we can definitely do that here in the function stack. So I like to oftentimes come into the function stack, create a variable, and let's go ahead and call this variable just the make. And the value, as long as I can access a variable here, that allows me to use dot notation to access any path in this variable. So I can go ahead and use dot notation here and say car.make. It's very important that your spelling is correct because Xano is going to parse through that data and look for an exact match of that field that you are defining. So if I go ahead and do that, and let's go ahead and just change the response to now this make variable that I created, what we can see is that now we will still return the make of the car, which here is Toyota. Now, besides just writing directly onto an input line, there is another method that we can use for dot notation, and that is with the get filter, which actually gets a specific path of a variable. So for example, if I wanted to do the same thing, let me go ahead, I'll leave that car variable, and if I can use this quick get filter. You can also find them in the big filter menu here. Right here I can go ahead and say get, and right here where it says path, I can go ahead and just type in make, because that is the name of that field. This get filter also allows us to set a default value, which is specifically helpful, especially when you're bringing in payloads from external sources such as third-party APIs, and possibly you are doing something with that data or adding it or editing it in the database, and maybe there's not always a value there. Setting a default value allows the function stack to continue to run without hitting an error. So just keep that in mind. So I'll hit update. It'll look like this. So car and then get the path of make is the same thing as saying car.make. And I'll show you when we go ahead and return this, we'll still get Toyota. And so dot notation is very useful because it allows us to manipulate the data in these different paths. So we can do that with filters or doing things in other variables by passing that data in the function stack from variable to variable. Now, additionally, the dot notation in Xano is very flexible and takes some complexities away from, say, some places where you might need to use loops or compile different indexes. For example, I'm going to jump to the get all cars here. And so if I go ahead and run this, you can see we get a whole list of different cars, their information. So as I was saying, dot notation in Xano takes away some of that complexity of a loop. So for example, if I wanted to get the makes of all the cars, what I can do here, we already have an array or a list. I'll just go ahead and create a new variable here like I did in the last endpoint, and I'll call this makes. and I'll hit the drop down. I'll select this car variable. Another important thing just to keep track of, if you're ever using dot notation right on a value line like this or input line, always make sure that you have the actual variable selected, not text, because if it's a text data type, it'll just be car.make as text. So always make sure that variable is selected there. So if I go ahead and save this, and let's go ahead and run and return the makes here, what Xano will do is it'll automatically process this array, and it'll come back with a list of all the different makes in our original array, which was that car variable. So we can see Honda, Toyota, Jeep, Ford. Dot notation is also flexible enough where you can use the indexes of arrays. So for example, if I wanted to go ahead and say indexes start at 0, that's the first one, I could do car.0.make, hit save, and we would return just the very first index of that array for the makes. Lastly, we can use dot notation to traverse through multiple levels, so it doesn't just stop at the first level. For example, let's go ahead and just return car again so I can quickly show you. When we run this, we had that maintenance object array here. So what we can do is we can traverse different layers deep. So let's say I wanted to find out, let's say, the description of all of the different maintenance that happen on all these cars, right? So what I can do is I can say something like, I'll call this variable maintenance details. And here, once again, I'll select that car variable. I'll go ahead to maintenance because that's the first field. And then description is within maintenance. So I can once again use that dot notation to traverse as many layers deep as I may need to go. And this will return me an array of all the maintenance descriptions of all the cars in this car variable. So if I go ahead and run this, and I need to change my response real quick to that maintenance details. And now when I go ahead and run this, now we can see here's all the different maintenance details that happen on all these cars in my database. We see new bumper, radiator, engine, etc. So that wraps it for dot notation. Once again, keep in mind you can use dot notation right on the variable line or any value or input line. Anywhere you see it, whether that's in a database request function, in some kind of data manipulation function, any other function really, even within filters. Make sure always that variable is set there. Right at the top, you can see it'll say var any. That knows you're in the variable data type. You can also use the get filter to define the paths that you want to go down. And that get filter has a default value if you ever need to define that, because maybe that field won't be there in some response you're getting. Additionally, you can traverse multiple layers deep with dot notation. And always you can manipulate that by adding filters or doing something to that variable that you are newly creating in the function stack. So that's it for dot notation. Definitely a very important concept to go over, not just in Xano, but programming in general. So if you found this video helpful, make sure to like it and go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And I'll see you guys in the next video.